I am mining investor and editor of Resource Stock Digest, Gerardo Del Real here with my partner, Mr. Nick Hodge, who is also an investor and the publisher of Daily Profit Cycle. This is the 278th episode of our weekly therapy session, and my lord, do we need it right now, that we call Investing in Bizarro World. We're going to talk markets. We're going to talk record highs for gold. We're going to talk about a dollar that is telling us something. And of course, we're going to talk about the elephant in the room, or the elephants in the room as it's turning out to be, right? The assassination attempt and the aftermath of it on Mr. Donald Trump, as well as Joe Biden having 2/3 of his party openly calling for his resignation and stepping down from the election. So that's a lot to get into, Nick. A heavy week, obviously, for the country and just in general. This is the stuff of fourth turnings. We've talked about it at length in the past. Before we get to the craziness and the markets, how are you, sir? How is your beautiful family? How are things near Spokane?
We're all doing well. Spokane is, doing fourth turning things as well. I've talked about some of those, but as a family, a unit, and, in our small quadrant of the world, things are good. And that's what's interesting about America, right? You can operate individually and then autonomously and with sovereignty, and sort of insulate and shield and protect yourself and your loved ones from some of those failing institutions and failed political policies and et cetera, some of which some of us saw coming sooner than others. And so when you see events like the past week and breakdowns of entire political parties, again, also in the past week, and the vice presidential nominee, which also happened in the past week, all those sort of things make more sense to you if you have the full context, which I like to think we do, and is one of the reasons people think to us. So you already mentioned the fourth turning. I mean, I saw people, like prominent people, thought leaders, just literally tweeting the cover of the book this weekend. Like Lynn Alden just tweeted the cover of the original Fourth Turning book. Like, no shit, man. That's exactly what's happening.
It's, by the way, it stays on my
Nice.
desk. Fucking didn't plan that, by the way, folks. We don't plan any of this stuff, but look, we have to talk. We have to talk Donald Trump. We have to talk the assassination attempt. We have to talk about the botched security team. First off, we're not. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to make this a partisan thing, because you both know that.
Sure.
I mean, we both know that I'm not a partisan guy. I just really don't have any loyalties to either party. I'd love to be able to argue ideas and dissect ideas and advance ideas. And I wish we could just vote on ideas, not candidates, right? But unfortunately, that's not the way our system is set up. What I am going to talk about, I want to start with the absolutely botched security job that his security detail did before, during, and after the shooting, right? I've watched it back and I caught it the very first time. I've been in situations where if my friends had reacted to me getting shot at in the way that the Secret Service reacted to me getting shot at before, during, and after, and I saw that video later on, we might not be friends in that situation anymore, right? And let's go in order. First and foremost, we've talked, and I've said it many, many times, that on the air years ago, I said I would be surprised if he makes it to a second election cycle, if either his party, the other party, or the deep state, and deep state being military industrial complex and the corporations that run this country, allow him to get in, right? However you feel about the Trumpster, he has survived every political scandal, including 34 felony convictions and a gunshot that, a millisecond later or earlier would have blown his head off Kennedy style. If anybody believes, well, let me start with my belief. If I don't believe that some 20-year-old walked with a ladder 15 feet high with his dad's AR, got on a sloped roof, waited in camouflage gear, that the Secret Service saw him some 30 minutes before, that a cop walked up there, had a rifle pointed to him, and walked away and then called it in, and then that Secret Service told everybody to stand down and wait until he fired shots off. I cannot believe that's the official account at this point. I cannot believe that that was allowed to happen. What happened afterwards is just as concerning to me for whoever your candidate or candidates are. Immediately after he gets shot in the ear, he's the iconic photo, right? Fight. And I got to say this, he's been a failed businessman, a failed husband, successful but failed politician. He's always been a brilliant marketer, man. And the fact that his marketing brain turned on that quickly, kudos to him on that. However you feel about the guy, beautiful work by Mr. Trump on that front. I mean, he absolutely captured the moment. He did exactly what anybody that is quick thinking and has their marketing cap on could have possibly have wanted to do. He couldn't have scripted that part any better. The part that really concerned me afterwards is they see that he's still alive. Secret Service literally lifted this guy up onto the truck and allowed the back of his head to be exposed. I don't know if you watch that part of the video again, Nick, but watch when they put him in the truck, in the SUV. He gets up, he throws his hand up again, and there's like a wedge. There's shoulder, Secret Service agent, shoulder, Secret Service agent, big round melon of Donald Trump's head just sitting there. And I'm looking at it going, what are they doing? Like, what are they doing? And so it's hard for me to speculate. I don't want to speculate. There's enough conspiracy theory stuff out on social media. But man, it is really hard to believe as a logical, simple human being that all of those things can happen at a rally where now we're being told the U.S. had intelligence that Iran was going to try an assassination attempt. Like, none of those dots connect to me. Unless I look at it from the perspective of, yeah, inside job by multiple people, a la Kennedy style. That's the only way that makes sense to me. So I said I wasn't going to speculate. That's all I can come up with. I'd love to hear your thoughts. That's a mouthful on my end, I know.
I mean, everybody's got thoughts, and everybody's been talking about it for a week at this point by the time that this podcast goes out there. And so I'm going to try not to put a lot of hot air into the ether because, at the end of the day, I don't know, and neither do most anyone else, right? So I would say that life is weird. Things happen that you can't comprehend. It's weirder than fiction in many ways, right? And you think about, the sequence of events that led to things in the past. I'm sure you've read about like all the things that had to go wrong for Chernobyl to happen and things like that, like the random things, right? The switch left on, the blinking light that's ignored, or whatever it is, right? And so we don't know what those things are in this scenario. You mentioned some of them, right? The local police maybe not coordinating, or the Secret Service not coordinating with the local police like they should have. There being a soft spot, this being outside the perimeter of the hard target or hard security area. So a lot of people have heard these things and said these things. And so I don't know. What I would say is this, it is not unexpected, right? And so the gold price is at an all-time record high, coinciding with, extreme volatility in politics and geopolitics. And that's more the takeaway for me than the female Secret Service agent who couldn't holster her gun and the implications that has about DEI hiring. Like, I could give two fucks about that angle and aspect of it, right? Like, what I care about is that it happened, whether it was, and this is, you talked about the partisanship, right? Immediately it's, oh, this guy's a registered Republican, or, oh, this guy argued for whatever liberal policies, whatever. It's like, I don't care. The takeaway is that you're at a point in this country where 223 rounds are flying at the opposition leader's head, right? And hitting it. And so that's wild. And then you start to see all these videos about like the trajectory of the bullets, and you hear this and hear that. And you really just do need to stop, take a step back, look for a citation, there's a small print at the bottom, and ask yourself, from whence is this video coming? From whence is this information coming? Who is putting this information out, and what do they want me to believe as a result of it? Because we just don't know. And so anyway, those are a lot of my initial thoughts. I've tried not to go down the rabbit hole. I agree that there's a lot of unanswered questions. The head of the Secret Service has already put out a statement. She will testify before Congress. I mean, that's all going to have to happen, right? So we'll see. But, par for the course. I guess another thing that's important to me is the implications, right? And what I've seen over the past week is Donald Trump solidify winning the presidency in November. The betting markets reflect that as well. And it's not just about getting shot. It's about some of those other things you mentioned at the top, right? 2/3 of the Democratic Party want Biden to step down. If you look at the betting markets, it's 50-50. If you want to place a bet, it's 50-50 odds on whether or not he's the nominee. And so literally no one knows, right? And that's, the
Again, not
uncertainty of a fourth
50-50
term.
if he's the president, if he's the nominee, right? That's important
Right.
because I know, yeah. Just if he makes it to be the nominee, not whether 50-50 that he's the president.
So you can't beat, Trump's faction when you have your own infighting on the other side. I mean, that's just sort of sports and war 101, right? And, the imagery that's come out, the selection of Vance, which I did mention at the top, that's solid fourth turning stuff, right? Do you know how old J.D. Vance is? He's 39 years old. I mean, he's an elder millennial. Yep. That's like definition of like the first round of millennials being born. And that's the generation that, has to come to power. And so some of the smarter takes I've seen are like, this election is, we're already moving past now, right? Now we're thinking about, J.D. Vance 2028 is sort of where your head has to move, right? And that lines up more with like the timing of the fourth turning and the rise of a new political party. And I don't know much about J.D. Vance. I mean, I've seen Hillbilly Elegy and I sort of lived his experience, right? I mean, we're the same age. We have families that were drastically affected by the opiate crisis. And so I get where he's coming from. And I see why. I mean, the media says that book, Hillbilly Elegy, explains the rise of Donald Trump. And it's not hard to see why. So anyway.
Well said. You touched on the opioid crisis, which again is a failure of oversight in our country, an intentional failure. And it doesn't just happen with corporations, the wealthiest corporations in the pharmaceutical industry. Boeing just copped out to a felony and forgive me, everybody, I'm freestyling this. I believe it's 292 people dying on their planes. And if the number's more or less, the important part is people died on those planes. And they were able to go ahead and plead guilty to a felony, pay a fine, and nobody does prison time. I challenge any of y'all out there to go and try to kill 292 people in any shape, way, fashion, or form.
Oh, shit.
I challenge any of y'all to go give fentanyl or opioids that leads to overdose deaths to hundreds of thousands of people out there, tens of thousands of people, and see if you're able to dodge prison time or worse. It only happens for wealthy corporations that have top-tier lobbyists. And we've been talking about this since 2016. I think one of the very first episode, we talked about how we should go get our own lobbyists. And, obviously we don't have the kind of capital those companies have, but that's really the only way you get your opinion heard in America right now. So then when I see that Clarence Thomas, a Supreme Court justice, is taking luxury trips to Russia and being donated gifts and from Russian authorities and not disclosing any of these things, and this is the same guy that's voting to give presidents immunity on whatever the hell they wake up and feel like doing on that crazy day, saying, nah, they can't be prosecuted. The direction that we're going in, regardless of who you're voting for, folks, has been enabled by both parties. And I, for one, am looking forward to the moment, and I hope I'm around for it, where we come together more as a country around ideas and the things we have in common and the things we should really be upset about. Yes, you should be upset that somebody tried to kill a presidential candidate in the United States of fucking America. That should not happen. Should not happen. You should also be upset about the fucking opioid crisis and the Purdue family. You should also be upset about the Boeings of the world getting away with murdering hundreds of people and being able to pay a fine in order to go ahead and relieve themselves of any criminal prosecution that would lead to prison time for anybody, despite how negligent they may or may not have been. And just to be clear, for everyone out there, I am nowhere near suicidal. I'm one of the happiest people I know. So if I pop up floating in the Austin River, I guarantee you I didn't jump, y'all. I have a lot to look forward to. Life is beautiful, man. I promise you it wasn't that. So, look, I say all that to say that all our major institutions right now are failing us, whether it's the Secret Service, the corporations, the Supreme Court, our presidential candidates.
Right.
It's all failing us all simultaneously. And that's exactly what the Fourth Turning book describes.
Well, then you said it beautifully, and you went all the way from the top with literally at the top with Boeing down to an individual in the Supreme Court. And the sad thing is that you could do that with different industries, whether it's Boeing and the airliners or opiates and whatever it is, all the way down to their lobbyists and the politicians that enabled that. And that's what I was sort of saying with the J.D. Vance there. And excuse me for getting emotional, but if you just look at, that's what the people are upset about. And yeah, Trump was the one who ended up getting elected as a result of that. But it wasn't like they were clamoring for some, Republican leader. There was a vacuum or a void that could have been, filled by anyone. He just happened to fill that void. And what I'm saying here about J.D. Vance, to continue what you're saying, is, I'm seeing things now that, I haven't seen in my political lifetime. Like they had a Teamster guy up at the RNC, right? I mean, you got J.D. Vance is praising the head of the FTC, talking about, monopolies and stuff. And so earlier you said like the system is not set up that way. Well, I might say the system is set up that way, checks and balances, et cetera. The forefathers are pretty insightful. What happens is that it gets bastardized over time and abused, and it gets all the way to a point where you think the system doesn't work, and then it goes all the way back to the other side. The system's worked since, the late 1700s, right? And so I believe it's going to continue to work. I do believe you'll be around to see a time when it changes. That was your question a couple of minutes ago. And I think it's because of things that are happening. I'm not some J.D. Vance zealot. I really didn't know who he was 14 days ago. I could have told you who wrote Hillbilly Elegy, but when I go and I read about his background and I look at where he came from and what he did, and then, some of the ideas that he has, it's like, oh yeah, man, like I can totally see why people gravitate towards that given what's going on in the country for the past 25 years. So anyway, all that to say, the poly market, which is the betting market's got, Trump over 60% chance of winning now. They nailed his winning of Vance, and, capital speaks. This is a capitalistic system. Polls are one thing, but, betting markets are another. And if you pay attention to those things, that's what I would say it is. I think you get a Trump administration here.
Well, let's see how things play out. I know that these historically these types of incidents aren't one-offs, right? Like I wasn't around in the 60s, but I know my history. And I know how, the 60s was a fourth turning for sure. And they didn't stop at Kennedy, right? They went and got his little brother afterwards, and they got Martin Luther King Jr. out of here. They got Malcolm X out of here. They got Fred Hampton out of here. They got a whole hell of a lot of thought leaders out of here. That were very, contrary to, again, military industrial complex, corporations that wanted to continue to influence election cycles there by policies, related or unrelated. Elon Musk is now taking SpaceX and Tesla out of California, bringing it here home to Texas, which is good for us economically, right? But I can't help but think that this shift happened right after, in the case of SpaceX, this attempt on Mr. Trump's life, which now appears, is going to contribute to him likely getting elected. And by the way, the appointment of J.D. Vance is an intelligent one, regardless of whether you agree with some of his policies and stances or not. And I disagree with most politicians on several things, but he's clearly an intelligent man that's got a compelling background that's going to resonate very, very well. And the fact that he's also got a track record of attacking Donald Trump, I think is actually an asset for both Mr. Trump and Mr. Vance, because it speaks to the flexibility of Trump's mind and him being able to elect someone as his running mate that he's clashed with in the past. And look, again, I don't know what the path forward looks like. I know it's going to be an interesting couple of months between now and the election. I hope as a country, as just humans, we're able to look at, I've said this a million times, our similarities and do less of the differences. And I sure the hell hope that when it's not worth it, that we're not willing to kill each other over differences that most times aren't tangible, or at the very least don't make that much of a difference in your everyday life, and is, kind of propelled to divide us by a lot of the media on both the right and the left. I hope we can start seeing more through that and just get to making this country a much better place, because it's got its challenges, but it's still the best thing going. I'm not going anywhere. So let's talk.
No doubt. I mean,
go ahead, Nick.
One quick thing. So
Yeah.
I did that whole exercise. As you know, I looked for, somewhere else to go. And as a lot of people find out when they do that, the U.S. is sort of the best place to be, right? And then just to tie it back to the fourth turning, and then we can move on. Neil Howe, who wrote that book you just held up, he gave like an hour-long presentation in the wake of this assassination attempt. And, he just pointed right to the polls as he would do. And he says, look, you've got Pew polls out there telling you that 1 in 5 Americans believe that political violence is necessary given the current political climate of the country. And then he did the math, what that works out to in terms of the generation of Mr. Cook. And he's saying that means you got 7 million people in his generation that believe political violence is necessary. For one of them to commit an act is, it's not that crazy. It would be crazier if one of them didn't commit violence, right? So anyway, there's that. So just tied it all the way back to the fourth turning, to the markets.
Yep. Let's talk about the market implications, because the market is clearly pricing in a Donald Trump presidency. The Dow was up some 700. Again, I'm freestyling 26 points the very first day the market opened. Gold made, as we told you it would, a brand new record highs, currently sitting right at the 2457 level. It looks primed to go to 2500. Copper sitting in the pocket right around the 432 level. The one indicator that I am watching closely is the US dollar index, which has now broken the 104 level and is sitting at 103.74. Now, it's not a coincidence to me that it has dropped pretty quickly, because if you look at some of Mr. Vance's stances and you look at Donald Trump's historic stance, both of them are in favor of a weaker dollar, right? And so when you factor that in with the likelihood of a rate cut now in September, and they're floating the idea of maybe Jamie Dimon as Treasury Secretary, well, you think Jamie Dimon's going to be friendly too? You think he's going to be friendly to J.D. Vance of 25 years ago that was working his way up? Or you think he's going to be friendly to J.D. Vance now, that is a successful political actor and obviously successful with, his law background and well off? He's going to be friendly to the rich people. He's going to be friendly to the corporations. So if things play out the way it looks like they're going to play out, you can expect a weaker dollar. You can expect much higher gold prices. You can expect much higher silver prices. Throw in a copper shortage there, which it is going to happen regardless of who gets elected. And I see a path to $6 and $7 copper really, really quickly here over the next 12 to 24 months.
I mean, there's so much there, right? People have pointed to the rise in the markets this week coinciding with the assassination attempt of Donald Trump and the concentration on the likelihood that, he's going to be the next president. But, and one thing we haven't mentioned yet is, Mr. Powell was also talking in the past week as well. The market is basically going to get its rate cut, right? I mean, it's pricing in a 90+% chance of a rate cut in September. You have even some people talking about a rate cut this month, which obviously is not going to happen. But, not to make it all about Mr. Vance, but, he quickly got his venture capital ties as well. If you read the whole, page, he's tied to Mr. Thiel and Mark Andreessen. And, Mr. Vance was an early investor in Rumble, which is a Canadian online video platform aligned with the political right. So, he's only been out of college for 10 years. I mean, he just got his JD from Yale in 2013, and he's already, found the people, right? So anyway, another thing I've said multiple times on this podcast is that people forget who appointed Mr. Powell. It wasn't Mr. Biden, it was Mr. Trump. So, and Mr. Powell is a Republican, and I think just people forget that, right? That's one of the easy things that's on the scoreboard that you can look up and see, like the shot clock, right? Like that guy's on the other team. I mean, that one was always easy to see. So dollar broke down back to the markets, and then to your point, the dollar is now technically bearish, and I think that's a function of the things that we've talked about in the past, but also last week. One, you got the rate cut coming. That's not good for the U.S. fiscally to have more loose monetary policy. That typically means weaker dollar. The other thing is a slowing economy. and I'm not dragging out the R word, but the interest rates, you sort of go along with that as well. And if the economy is going to slow, and if at some point we're going to have to get back to some sort of stimulus or QE or whatever it is, then that's another reason that the dollar could break down. And you also had the potential for vast political uncertainty in the beacon of the world, which is the United States, right? I mean, literally an inch to the right, and the markets are much different. And I think the world that you're living in this week is much different. So I think some of that is getting priced in as well. Like, oh shit, it's the dollar, which is the global reserve currency, is could have some volatility here. So anyway. Yeah, we were saying last week that gold was breaking out, that volatility was low. I mentioned the GDP last week, and we were saying that gold could go higher, and sure enough, it hit an all-time record high here in the past week with 2,500 firmly in sight, and silver, starting to look good as well. So, commodities looking good. A pullback amid a super cycle. This is what I would attribute this week's action to. But still in a bull market and still invested and writing checks for sure.
So just to summarize, folks, gold's going higher, silver's going higher, copper's going higher, lithium's bottoming, and all this low quality supply from Africa and out of China, that's going to come to an end. It's not sustainable. It'll turn when it turns. It'll be violent to the upside the way it was violent to the downside. Uranium is going higher, and I had a buddy who's pretty high up in the military. We had lunch last week, and we were talking about the election, and he leans more to the right, and he said, well, what happens with this Inflation Reduction Act that you've cited in some of your work, and all the incentives for electric vehicles and all of the money that's being allocated towards nuclear. He goes, he's in the Army and pretty high up there. He goes, we have a number of nuclear programs that we're working on right now, installing small modular reactors across the country. But a lot of that funding is coming from the Department of Energy. Do you think that stops? And my quick, simple answer was no. I don't think even if the Inflation Reduction Act is rolled back in many ways, most of the money that's going to these companies to build out this clean energy infrastructure happens to be in red states. And the last thing that Mr. Trump and his administration are going to do is roll back funds in red states that voted for him overwhelmingly, because it would be a betrayal to the citizenry that voted for him, right? His base. And so I don't think that happens. However you feel about electric vehicles, again, I don't think it's a coincidence that Mr. Musk is going to donate $45 million a month through a super PAC until the election to help fund Mr. Trump's campaign. I think that's him saying, I want to be in good graces when you get elected, so that, my EV subsidies continue to come in for our vehicles, because we sell the majority of electric vehicles here in the United States. Oh, and also, by the way, we want to be the dominant infrastructure builders of the EV charging stations in the country. And don't dismiss the data storage aspect and the energy storage aspect of lithium and copper and uranium, because there is huge demand that is coming online there. And again, SpaceX coming here to Texas again coincides with my thoughts that Mr. Musk, who's always, however you feel about him, has been very, very ambitious, likely has a plan to get heavily, heavily involved in that aspect of the infrastructure build-up as it relates to data storage and energy storage. So any thoughts there, Nick?
I mean, he already is, vastly tied in with the government in terms of SpaceX. I mean, he delivers all their payloads to space. They're utterly reliant on him in some respects. And so he's got a pretty good bargaining tool. I've seen some of the murmurs about, uranium has been soft for the past couple of days again. And the only reason I can find is a narrative one, right? Is sort of what you just said, that an incoming Trump administration wouldn't be good for nuclear energy for some reason, likely because of subsidies or funding. And yeah, I don't really see the alternative, especially as it relates to nuclear. There's a million things you could point to, but I just give you two that are in my head right now. Like, I've been talking about energy stocks. I've been recommending oil stocks. Oil's been bullish. It continues to be bullish. That should tell you one thing about inflation and commodities just by oil being bullish. But the other thing is, you look at the companies, right, that have been doing well, and sort of like there's only a handful major companies, the Exxon, BP, Chevron, Conoco, et cetera. And the ones that are doing better are the ones that are firmly committed to oil and gas, and the ones that have been laggards as these stocks break out are the ones that have, pulled back from oil and gas like BP and committed more towards renewables. So I think we're still firmly in a fossil and nuclear world that provide the baseload energy that we need. So maybe I'll give you 3 examples. I said I was going to give you 2. In Zambia the other week, they were having like an energy crisis, right? They're enduring a drought. Their hydroelectric dams aren't producing a nameplate capacity, so they were having blackouts and brownouts in a developing nation. Well, what do you think they elected to permit to build? Do you think they built a wind field? Do you think they built a solar plant? I mean, what do you think they decided to build? They're going to build a coal plant, Gerardo.
Yeah.
When you need electricity, you need electricity. And so and whether that's coal or nuclear or natural gas, these baseload problems aren't going to go away. And then the last example I'll give you, and I'm sort of meandering a little bit, so I'm sorry, but I think it's a good answer, and it's all tied together, is that, this progressive city council member in New York City, I was reading this week, wants to mandate that all landlords have to install air conditioning units in their properties, which I don't have a bone about that one way or the other. I'm not really into landlord-tenant law, but where my brain goes is, okay, you're a progressive in New York City. I bet you're super pro-renewable and well, I don't want to put words in that guy's mouth. But anyway, what I'm thinking is, how the fuck are you going to power all these new AC units in one of the most populous cities in the entire world, right? When we've already seen stories coming out of New York about, banning natural gas furnaces or hot water heaters and things like that. And so when I see stuff like that, like, wait, you don't want natural gas, but you want everybody to have an AC unit in their window? Like, somebody didn't go to like basic input output class, like they missed that day of school. Like the power's got to come from somewhere. And so I feel like I'm way off topic, but
no, it ties in beautifully.
I'm very bullish on commodities and energy.
It ties in beautifully. I do want to talk Project 2025 at a different time on a different podcast. This isn't the week for that. But as we get closer to this election, I do want to dive into that a bit more. And I want to dive into it a bit more before we actually talk about it. I do think that as potential policy to what looks like now is going to be a Trump presidency, if things continue the way that they're looking right now, I think it's important as a country to understand what's in there and how it affects everybody from veterans to seniors, to LGBTQ people, to, people on medication, to you name it. It's very, very in depth. It targets every part of our life, every facet of our life. I think that's worthy of a discussion if we start believing and seeing that, yes, indeed, President Trump is going to be, once again, President Trump, right? Back to markets real quick. Private placements. I'm excited because we just offered 2. And, the deal flow this service that Nick and I offer, folks, is the priciest of all our services, right? And it's the priciest of all our services because you actually literally are getting access to the same deal flow that we get access to. So we get pitched deals almost every day, definitely every week. We say no to most of them. The deals go anywhere from biotech to crypto to cannabis to you name it, resource, gold, copper, oil, lithium, whatever the case may be. We have a pretty damn good network of venture capitalists, financiers, geologists, and people that we've been fortunate enough to meet and cultivate relationships with. And I'd like to think integrity and the background for doing what we say and saying what we do in the market and as shareholders, where companies are now very receptive to us allowing our subscriber base in to these deals. And we've talked a lot. We brought one to you, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago. I mentioned to you that particular deal was going to be the biggest check I've ever written. That's up 60% in 3 weeks, folks. The fund hasn't even got started with that yet. And 60% in 3 weeks is pretty damn consequential when you start writing the kind of checks that we're writing. I mean, we took, I think over 60% of that entire financing. It was a $3.5 million financing. So we have another one, and we have it in 2 sectors that I really like right now. We have one in the silver space. We have one in the lithium space. lithium is so out of favor. Again, it makes my contrarian heart smile. And the cynic capitalist in me hopes that it stays this way for another 3 to 6 months, so I could just go back and double and triple down on my lithium positions, because the trend is clear to me. I don't worry about lithium in the mid to long term. The short term might be a little rocky for a little bit longer, because we don't know how much more supply China and Africa is going to flood the market with. So short term volatility, mid to long term, I'm so excited to offer that deal to our subscribers. And then we have a silver deal as well. That with silver, I think about to really, really break out, a weakening dollar, geopolitical uncertainty. I think it's going to be a hell of a deal as well. That's going to do extremely, extremely well. So I say all that to say, we'll put a link up to that service. You have to be an accredited investor. It's not cheap, but my Lord, it's not expensive if you're able to tap into the right deals. And we'd like to think that we offer a good variety of sectors and companies at different stages of their life cycle to make it worthwhile to anybody that's allocating more than $5,000 to $10,000 in any space.
Yeah, I think that, there's probably a bit of an education that goes along with it as well, because you have friends that have started doing this in the past couple of years. I have friends that have started participating in private placements, and it's something that is foreign to a lot of people, even though it's very common in the markets, certainly in the speculative markets and in sectors where companies need development capital, R&D capital or exploration capital, whatever it is. These are, yes, private placements, but the companies are public almost 100% of the time. You're buying the shares just directly from the company. That's called a non-brokered private placement. There's no broker involved. The companies are selling shares to an investor to generate capital. Your capital goes right to the company. The shares come right to you. That's a private placement. It's not a private deal. The company is trading, and you can sell those shares after the appropriate hold time. It's just a different way of buying the shares as opposed to buying them in the open market with E-Trade or on any other sort of brokerage platform. The difference is that there's different sort of incentives involved, either in the form of cheaper shares than they're trading into the market. You can give a discount up to a certain percentage that the exchange allows. I mean, you also get warrants, which a lot of people don't understand because they've never had the good fortune to have them or to have options. So they allow you to buy more in the future without any risk. If it goes up, great, your pot gets bigger. If it goes down, you have no risk. You don't have to exercise them. So that's the basic structure of a deal. We have lots of reports and information up on that. We can go through it. But the benefit is when these are early stage deals, you have the chance to get in before they've made a big discovery or before there's some big catalyst. And as a result, before the rest of the market gets to bid up the shares to make the asset or the company have a valuation that reflects the discovery that they made or the breakthrough that they had or the catalyst that they achieved. Anyway, lithium and silver. I guess one more thing. That's why we've had success over time, right? A couple of things I want to say. You've got to do a lot of these deals because what happens is it's a batting average thing. They're not all going to work, but the ones that do work, they make the batting average such that you can get into the Hall of Fame, right? 1,000 and in some cases 10,000% winners. And so it's really tough to cherry pick one. You know this obviously better than a lot of people. Our mentor knows this. If someone someone asks you to give them a stock pick, we're loath to do that, right? Yep. Because it's like, man, I need to give you 10 and you need to buy equal amounts of all of them, especially if it's something speculative. Anyway, so if you follow us over time, and we've been doing this for over a decade now, you have success. There's no other way to say that. The people that have followed us have had success. And now we have a fair, I won't say large, but a decent group. And this is another key point, right? Mm-hmm. You talked about the price of the service. And it's also got a cap on it, no more than 250 people. Yep. You just mentioned a private placement that we did a couple of months ago that's already up 60 or 65%. Mm-hmm. That deal was done at, I pulled it up here so I can have it all, 35 cents per share, and you got a warrant at 50 cents. So by the way, those warrants are already in the money as of today's close.
Ta-da!
That's a whole nother thing. What happened was that company announced a $2.5 million private placement, right? And so if we have 250 member limit on our service, well, that only allows these guys to write checks $10,000 a piece, and we've raised the entire $2.5 million, right? And what happens is when you're dealing with accredited investors, guys of these natures, they're writing checks larger than $10,000, right? Some of these guys are writing 50, 60, six-figure checks in some cases, right? And so these small raises, because they're often $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $5 million, the allocation gets spoken for quickly. And if you have a bunch of people, people don't get the allocation they want. And that's why it's priced the way that it is. It's $5,000. I mean, that just is what it is. But if you're putting $50,000 into every deal, then that becomes a small percentage over time. And we're certainly not taking a percentage of your winnings like a broker or a hedge fund would do, right? So that's all that. And the other thing is the minimums. Sorry, I'm just giving a lot of stuff because we've been fielding customer service calls about private placements, and I'm trying to educate, right? Because I think there's a learning curve to trying to get people to do this. Is like, oh, well, people say, can I get in for 2,000 or can I put 5,000 in? The answer might be technically yes, you can put 5,000 in, but you really need to get to a point where you're putting more than that, again, into each deal, because my gut says if you're asking about putting 5,000 in, you might not have the 5 or 10,000 for the next deal, right? Yeah. Like you got to be able to put
buy
money
it in the
into
market.
Right. Multiple of these deals. And so at a certain point, it becomes a thing like if you can't participate in every deal with a meaningful amount of capital, then like you probably shouldn't be doing this. And so anyway, that's just another thing. And then the last thing is to these deals. So one lithium and one silver. You and I both own the lithium deal. We've been long-term supportive shareholders. I'm not sure how much you want to reveal about it, but they have a quality lithium asset. They've already put out, they're drilling now. They put out results that say they have intercepted lithium pegmatite. We don't have the percentages yet because we're waiting on the chemical assays, but you want to talk a little bit more about the asset?
Yeah, no, look, I mean, we have the width of the mineralization. We know that, historically the grade has been a top tier grade, and we know that the cumulative intercepts that we're getting are in the order of 100, 120, 150 meters wide when you add all the mineralization in each individual hole. Their hit rate was, I believe, 100% of the holes that they've drilled thus far as intercepting lithium spodumene mineralization in the pegmatites. It's in a top-tier jurisdiction. It's got a top-tier VP of exploration that I'm very familiar with. The group behind that VP of exploration has been in the business for decades on end, responsible for making one of the most significant lithium discoveries of the recent cycle, a discovery that I think is going to, again, when it's all said and done, truly stand by itself. And so when you have that scale and you have that grade and you have that jurisdiction and you have the management team, and I see that the stock's pulled back to levels where they're doing a financing cheaper than the last check that I wrote. That presents an opportunity if you're a contrarian, if you're able to hold the stock for more than, the 4 months that you're mandated to hold it through participating in a private placement. So again, like Nick said, you want to do several deals. You want to spread out the commodity mix. We've talked a lot about Patriot Battery Metals on this podcast and what a success that's been. Well, look, it's also pulled back. If you bought it at 10, if you bought it at 15, you're probably pissed off at Gerardo because he told you it deserved to be $30 to $40. Guess what? Nothing's changed. It's a better company now than it was when I said that. But the lithium spot price has fallen 85 to 90%. So what changed was the lithium sentiment, not the company executing. Company's executed brilliantly. It'll be back. It'll hit those lofty heights when it does. And I have zero doubt about that team's ability to turn that ship around. That will happen with time. As far as this new deal, tiny market cap, $25-30 million last time I checked. And what I believe they're on to, I think is going to be world class, and it's not going to be worth $20 or $30 million. It's going to be hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars when that's all said and done. And then the other thing I really like about lithium, and this is a blessing and a curse, things happen quick in the space, y'all. Y'all saw how quick Patriot went from 16 cents to $17.87, and then you saw how quickly it pulled back from that to $5. The turn back up can be just as quickly. So I guess what I'm saying on the lithium deal, we're offering it to you at bargain basement prices. It's exclusive. We have good access. We know the team. We trust the team. They check all the boxes for writing a check on my end of it. And the silver deal, is similar in that nature, just a silver deal. So anyhow, subscribe. It'll be open, I believe, 2 to 3 weeks. Nick, am I correct on that? End of the month?
So yeah, let me put a finer point on it, and I do want to tell you about the silver deal. So that lithium deal is open, I believe, until July 30th, which is one day before the end of the month. So call it the end of the month. We have details up on private placement intel. All subscribers have gotten that already. Phone number 844-334-4700 if you want to learn more about that deal or private placements in general. And then on the silver deal, I'm pretty excited about it because it's been private for a long time, and I've been involved for a long time, since like 2015 or 2016. They had one flagship asset. That's a 30 million ounce silver resource that's likely open pitable at current prices. So that's got the resource on it. It's de-risked and advanced. And then in the interim, in the past couple of years, they negotiated a deal with Pan American to get a suite of projects, the most advanced of which Pan American spent $1.25 million on, selecting the targets and getting it permitted, et cetera. So it's fully permitted, including the water permit, ready to drill from 2 pads, I think 36 holes over the next year, fully permitted. That drilling, 3,000 meters, will start immediately after the IPO, which is expected in Q4. Company's raising $4 million at 30 cents, I believe it is. It is super tight structured. I mean, only 30-some million shares out, no warrants, no options, no debt. They've done really well to keep it sort of tightly structured while it's been private. And they missed this is important, they missed the 2020 window to go public. These companies try to catch a window, right? Well, the window's here. You got silver at $30. The prospectus will be approved by the exchange, likely by the time you've seen this podcast. So it's a full prospectus deal. I have to check on the hold times as a result of that. That's one question I did have. But anyway, tight structured. And by the way, the grab samples on that project they're going to drill are like 1,500 grams per ton silver with 2 grams per ton gold, and one of those holes was like 9% copper too. So anyway, it'll be interesting to put a drill hole into that for sure. And that's that. So those details are also to private placement intel. And that deal's not open as long. I think you got to have expressions of interest in by the 23rd. So first come, first served. I know that's not a lot of time, but members have already had a chance to gather around the trough, as it were. What else, Gerardo?
Couple of things. I want to thank everyone that commented and opined on last week's episode, giving their thoughts on the podcast and, the ideas that we're contemplating as far as accessibility to this podcast. Thank you all very much. It's deeply appreciated. Thank you for your viewership. And also, don't forget, I'm supposed to remind you every week, dailyprofitcycle.com/subscribe. Tons of free info on there. Lots of editors there, including Mr. Hodge and myself, giving you our thoughts on all things market. Obviously, that is where this podcast currently is hosted for viewing. And then lots of good quality info on there. That's all I have. Anything on your end, Mr. Hodge?
No, that's it. I'm glad you all are listening. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for commenting and for your feedback about, me mentioning the possibility of taking this private. I'm glad you guys are listening, and I'm glad you value the information. So no plans currently to change this, but there are, plans being put in motion to make some changes. So you'll be fully informed when and if that happens. And I hope you're staying cool. Massive heat wave out there that we probably need some more nuclear reactors to power our air conditioners for.
Stay cool, stay safe, be kinder. I mean, however kind you are, be a little kinder. It doesn't hurt, guys. It's free. Try to see more of the similarities and less of the differences. And please, please, please don't let the media and these people out there that are trying to divide the way they want to. That only benefits the people that don't get affected by the stuff that they're putting out there. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with Mr. Nick Hodge. This was the 2700th. The 270th felt like the 2700th. This one was a lot. 278th episode of our weekly therapy session that we like to call Investing in Bizarro World. Y'all take care, everybody.
See ya.
Hey there, you independent-minded investor. If you like this video, make sure to tell us so by clicking the like button below. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another one. And share it with everyone you know on social media. You can also click the link in the description below to check out more information-packed videos just like this one. Thanks for watching.